Buon pomeriggio e
Good afternoon. Welcome back to those who were here this morning in the first session of this very important day of the Biella Creative Cities Forum 2023. And welcome to those who just reached us for the second session in the afternoon. For those who are not here, my name is Marco Merola. I am a journalist and scientific communicator, and I'm here to lead you in the journey of the second session that will end at approximately 6:30. This will also be very interesting, and I will have to be very careful with the timekeeping so that all the very interesting guests have the opportunity to share their knowledge. Due to this, I don't want to waste any more time, and I would like to call the first guest of the afternoon on stage, Mr. Panza, the Councillor for the Mountain of the Ministry for Regional Affairs. So, your role is crucial at such a historic moment. We often hear on the mountains, also in other countries, and in Italy, of course, we have our beautiful mountains. They are richness, but as we have seen, due to the climate crisis, they also present some criticalities. So the first topic that I would like to tackle with you is what is the direction and also the political philosophy that is being followed at the moment to protect what we have, avoiding further impact on the mountains and saving the recreational activities, economic activities and sports that are done in the mountains. This morning, we have not mentioned important protest events like the bobsleigh track in Cortina. It seems that the race will be elsewhere, but in Switzerland and in France, there are many movements that are trying to hamper the violation of the mountains. In the case of glaciers, we saw a digger that was digging a glacier to prepare for the races that should be during these days. So, at a national level, what are we doing? First of all, good afternoon, and thank you for your very nice invitation. Let me take 1 minute for the video that was sent. I ought to say that, as I also come from the mountains, seeing wool was very beautiful. It was a nice memory of my grandmother who had sheep, and she would weave the wool, and so I felt the smells, and those memories took me back to my childhood. So thank you for these emotions. What are we doing for the mountains? I could tell you that if there are no surprises, and with the benefit of doubt, 90% next Monday, in a few days, at the Council of Ministry, we will discuss the Mountain Bill, an act that has its roots in something that started with the previous government, with Ministry Gelmini, who took a bill that a project for a law to the Council of Ministries that had a series of points to tidy up the legislation concerning the mountains. So we started from there as the legislative procedure stopped with the fall of the Draghi government, and so with Ministry Calderoli we took up again the reins of that work with a starting point that was already present in the Gelmini decree, but I wanted to highlight it. I wanted to give it a human-centered view. So I want to put back in the center of everything that concerns the mountains, the people who live the mountain. Those who live in the mountains and want to stay there. Unfortunately, we know that in spite of climate difficulties that affect a wide part of the mountains and its activities, the businesses that are there, we should not forget that in the mountains, people, families, and business live, maybe due to wrong decisions or hasty decisions were neglected for a while. So with this bill, we wanted to give back the mountains its momentum. And unfortunately, these issues affect a lot of areas in our country. That is the depopulation of the mountains, and we have to counter it with a strategy and with some pillars that can't just work on their own. That is the delivery of services, the ability to keep businesses, and to allow young couples to go back and settle there. Maybe they had experiences elsewhere, far from the mountains, but they must be able to go back to our alpine towns and villages, and they must be able to go back there and start a family. So with this approach, we want to try and give back some life to the mountains. We saw that during the COVID lockdown, we could see the potential of the mountains. Those who were able to go back to the mountains because they had a second residence or they had their parents there, they moved back to the mountains, and there are also lessons that can be learned there. So there must be total coverage of wide band for those who work remotely, and they must be able to settle in the valleys. Last week I was at a congress in Brescia where there was a director in the Silicon Valley who is from Valtellina, and for 15 years he's been working from Valtellina, directing 3 startups in California, working from his computer. And he goes skiing in the morning, he walks in the woods in the afternoon. Of course, this is an exception, but it proves that you can stay in your valley and still perform a business activity. Of course, it can't be done by a mason, by a manual worker, but there are many expertise, many works that can be performed remotely. Like an architect can go and check a site, but then they can do the planning from their town, maybe a village of 700 inhabitants in the mountains. If you have these possibilities, that means that we need a health service that is present there. We need good schools. There should not be a law that forces small schools to close, otherwise that will only make the situation worse. We have made some derogations in mountain schools because we know that sometimes some schools have mixed classes or they have to be closed because there are not enough students. But we consider this number of students as some transitory figure, hoping for the trend to change. But we need a law that has some vision of what the future might be. Concerning environmental issues, the part that we have decided to tackle is the valorization of local production. So farming and food production, that must also be protected for forestry, for agriculture. The context is more complicated compared to the plain, but people who want to perform these activities must be able to do it. Maybe law won't solve the problems of the mountains, but this is one first step, and it is important. We ought not to forget that our Constitution, Article 44.2, implies that the government makes some policies for the mountains, that it is the only constitution, apart from the Swiss one, and we can understand why, that contains the word mountain in its text. So we are working to try and consolidate the future of our mountains. We have the potential. And I always say that. Let me just welcome Mr. Messner, who's just arrived, and we are very proud of having him with us. We strongly believe that we should go beyond the evidence of facts. That is, that those who live in the mountains in our country were always left behind. So, in the face of services that are not the same in the mountains and in the cities, they have no advantages, not even tax advantages. So the people who live in the mountains pay the same taxes as people who live in the cities without having the same services. Now, let me just ask you about a curiosity I have. I agree on what you say, that the citizens in the mountains have been left behind, but for the businesses that are linked to the mountains, like families that manage a cabin in the mountains or snow facilities, so all the related businesses with winter sports. And objectively, in a few years, we will have no more snow. And in the year 2022-23, we had 60% less of snowfall in the mountains. Well, that was something exceptional, something that was unprecedented. And this act, does it include any incentive to reconvert, transform activities and businesses? Well, no, not so specifically, because the act should be as wide as possible. And then on some matters, the regional councils will define the policies and what must be done for their territory. Also in an independent approach. We know in our country there is not a single mountain. There are different mountains. Of course, mountains in Piedmont are different from the mountains in Veneto, in Trentino, and they are also different from the Apennines, which is also different in Tuscany and in Calabria with the Sila and so on. So being too specific would be sort of artificial. And the goal of the act is to prepare a framework, and then the regional councils will have fundings, and they will also have the task of defining the activities and policies. For sure, the topic of winter sports is very topical at the moment. It is true that we had 2 very bad years concerning snowfall. It is also true that the scientific community agrees, not really on the fact that it is not going to snow anymore, but on the fact that the so-called snow aerial, so the area where it is going to snow, will go up and up. Another detail, the thermal zero has been for many weeks under 5,000 meters. Generally, it is at approximately 3,000. Yes, the aerial will go up and up where it snows. So all the snow facilities, all the skiing facilities, the smallest ones that are also old, and they are at 600, 700 meters, but also on the Apennines. Unfortunately, they are probably destined to close. All the rest will remain operational. We still have a strong request by users. The fact that it did not snow did not stop the request of the population who want to go skiing. And on the other hand, where it is not possible for clear reasons, because it is true that it does not snow, but it is also more difficult to make snow artificially, which is anthropologically controversial. Yes, I don't truly agree on that. I had an interview with the students before. They are very good, and in our country, we pay the toll of high difficulties of maintenance and collection of water. We would need much more watersheds, and those who make snow do that in a way. So the production, the snow making, from an energetic point of view, is not so impacting as it could seem, but the delivery of snow. I heard someone say that in the cannons that are used for snow making, bleach is used, which is not true. And the release of melted snow is released in the environment, where you can't make snow due to the climate conditions. Keeping this water means that it can be used for other uses, that is the agriculture or the production of hydropower. So sometimes there's also some lack of knowledge of the whole procedure of the whole cycle of production of snow. Of course, thinking that we can create a snow-making basin at 600 meters of height is a little bit difficult. Yesterday, I also showed a picture from China. You might remember that in 2022, there was no snow and everybody was skiing on artificial tracks. We have to see what happens with Milano Cortina for the Winter Olympic Games next year. So it is all artificial. It is also a philosophical thing. It seems that we are forcing things a little bit too hard. Yes, but remember that during the COVID lockdown in 2020, we had the highest snowfall ever, maybe. Yes, we also had 4% less CO2 in the atmosphere because the world stood still for 2 hours. But the scientific community does not fully agree on that. Yes, this is the lowest datum. Yeah, I am quoting reports that are not my own. I remember that in the year 1988 was a year when it did not snow on the Alps. Maybe those 2 years were even less. We even had less snowfall, even worse than the last 2 years. And then climatologists, of course, don't take a 2 years reference, but a historical series of 15 years at least to be able to make forecasts. We all hope it snows. The only thing on which the whole scientific community agrees is that it is going to snow at higher levels. But of course, before it does not snow anymore, some time will pass. I think we need a sustainability strategy. We also need skiing facilities and resorts. Winter sports account for 150,000 jobs. And so it is communities that have no huge alternatives that must also be kept in mind. We must also consider that last year, when there was no snow and some made it, it is also a factor of slow tourism and a different approach to mountains. So people went walking, hiking, and there were other sports that could be done in the mountains. this is nearly the end of our speech. We will speak a lot of water, and one problem is how to get water in situations of extreme drought. So there's also a problem of networks, and we saw that this morning. In this sense, does this act also include something on water? Well, no, concerning water in this sense, these are infrastructures, and last year during the water crisis, we had a coordination table. We must intervene in these cases, but these procedures require a lot of time, and unfortunately in our country, in addition to paying the toll of bad maintenance for many years, we also pay the toll of what was the Vaillant effect. In our country, we would need some more basins and watersheds. I'm not just speaking of works that impact the environment, but basins that were made 100 years ago, flooding villages and valleys. Now they are also turning into a tourist attraction and also a different source of biodiversity. Where there were pastures, now there's a lake with trouts, with salmons, and different fish. So it is something that we should also reflect upon, where and how it is also always difficult. And the NIMBY topic affects us all. But a careful reflection on where and how make new basins and watersheds. We are not speaking of gigantic dams, but maybe some small basins would be useful. We can learn by our Swiss cousins, and they know something about basins. They have just opened last year in the Valois Canton a new dam with a battery system, so an accumulation of water that performs much better. So the production of hydropower is much more performing. And the management of water, as we are in Biella, in Piedmont, just in this very region, as water is a richness that the mountains have, there was an act to guarantee the water standards. So we believe that the same act in the region of Lombardy, well, nowadays the hospital of Sondrio is powered by water. So they don't pay the electricity bill anymore because the energy that they make use of is produced by water, by hydropower, produced by big groups that then take it to the city. This is a virtuous procedure that must be supported and reused. Unfortunately, our time is over. We hope that we have further occasions to speak. So thank you, Mr. Panza. Thank you very much indeed. And now, before our next speaker, we have a short video that we would like to show.
Sono riuscito a fare non soltanto le cime più alte del mondo, ma anche le cime più alte di tutti i continenti. Non era una gara, non ero in competizione con nessuno, era una possibilità. La performance per me era lo stile che sono riuscito a cambiare. Noi tentiamo di realizzare quello che all'inizio è un sogno. Il sogno diventa un progetto e poi si tenta di realizzarlo. Nel realizzare siamo artisti, più artisti che sportivi. Fare quello che si ama significa dare senso a quello che facciamo. E la magic line che volevo scalare sulla tappa 2 era la linea all'inizio che stava nella mia testa che volevo salire. E così anche per una ditta come la Fila è importante inventare la magic line, la linea ideale su una montagna, la linea ideale per un grande pubblico.
Avrete capito che il prossimo... Of course, it is clear that the next guest is Reinhold Messner, alpinist, writer. He will talk about traditional alpinism, a passion between live and die. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Buon pomeriggio, signori.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. Unfortunately, there's not much time to stay here. Tonight I will be in Germany, but I'm here. Nowadays I'm here with you. After my intervention, of course I'm available to answer to your questions, if there are some questions, of course, but I would like to tell something about traditional alpinism and my approach to the mountains. I was born in the Dolomites, in the little valley of Valdefune. In the left, the southern part, and on the right, my childhood, thinking that the world was big as my valley. It was not possible to see beyond. The two mountains, one to the left and one to the right, and in the middle a plane flying, disappearing among the mountains. And I was always wondering the origin and the destinations of the planes. Maybe the valley is little. I was born during the Second World War. My family was made up of 9 children, a great job for my parents. And when we were very young, I was the second one. My oldest brother, me and my oldest brother were responsible for the youngest one. My mother was not able to do everything. This is my world. These are my origins, where I live, the mountains. When I was 5, my father brought me up to a peak of mountains, 5,000 altitude. But the challenge was coming back to the valley, to our home. And it is strange that thinking about the return, I was wondering, how did I manage to reach that peak? And then looking to this fatigue, to this great experience. Mountains were my world. My dreams were wider and wider. I was attracted by climbing, but not just climbing the easiest tracks. My father and I were attracted by the most difficult ones, Antilao, Pelmo, with that kind of furniture, just rope, hemp rope. Harness, our jackets made of very simple fabrics instead of Gore-Tex. My first enthusiasm was rocket, climbing on rocks, extreme climbing rocks. And to do it properly, you must be able to concentrate, to have physical strength to hold yourself, and also you need agility. But the most important thing is, of course, concentration, forgetting everything, because people climbing with a head full of stress and things and thoughts will never reach far destination. You have to focus on. You must concentrate, thinking about the tips of your feet, making them becoming rock, so that you can identify your body with rock. This identification makes the flow developing. This is not just an uphill without energy, but it allows you to climb easily, and you develop the heart of climbing. When I was 25, the first time, my brother and I were invited to participate in expeditions to Himalaya. That was not possible to us because we were not equipped with the furniture. There were 18 alpinists, and more or less it costed lots of money with 9 tons of materials. And it took 3 months. The destination was not the peak of Nanga Parbat. This is the peak. But the point was to climb the highest slide of this mountain, accounting for 4,000 meters. You should be aware of the fact that also in Himalaya, alpinism was developing a lot. The first 100s of alpinism were targeting to conquer the peaks. When they reached the K2 for the first time was a great success. But during the 70s, new generation was approaching differently because all the peaks were already conquered, so that the new generation was facing the difficult slides of the mountains. In the 70s, a British group was able to reach the Napurna West Slide, and after a few months we were able to climb also the Unga Slide of Nanga Parbat. But my brother started suffering from mountain sickness, and it was not possible to think to come back without any slope. We were starting from the last camp at 70,000 meters. I cannot tell something in Italy about this experience, but we were obliged and forced to build a kind of shelter at that kind of altitude. This is shocking. My brother survived, fortunately, and then it was not possible to come back tracking the same slide. We chose to pave another way, a very dangerous way, and my brother suffered by an avalanche. You can see in this photo, this was the track that we chose to come back home. Less difficult, but very dangerous. With this kind of high slide, I would like to show to them, yes, glaciers is full of this kind of slides moving fastly, and this represents the basis of the glacier mass, and sometimes you suffer from avalanche and you cannot survive. My brother and I, yes, these are some photos that I would like to share with you. We lived in the tents, in the kind of igloo, where it was possible to be safe with the materials that were available. Was very simple, very rough. And during this expedition, we lived during 40 days in the slides, uphill and downhill, and we have changed ideas. We thought that, okay, once we were reaching home, it will be possible to do something similar by ourselves. without any manager accompanying young alpinists to make them experiences this kind of alpinism. I was not attracted by this kind of alpinism because I always loved to do it by myself, thinking that I was able to do it. 8 years later, I participated in many expeditions as organizer, but also as partners and members of the group. And I start approaching the mountains with a different style, with a different behavior. In 1978, 8 years after that experience, I started the expedition with 60 kilos. I was totally alone. The expense was accounting for $5,000 with a little tent for 10 days, and luckily that tent was mounted near the glacier, the cliff, and the earthquake moved the mountain so that the high cliff and the snow fall down. I was there in my tent. Avalanche was overcoming me. Nothing bad, but then the slide was totally smooth. No risk of materials falling down because everything had already fallen down. I reached the peak in 3 days alone. This was the first expedition that I made alone up to the peak. And then was the moment when alpinism, high altitude alpinism, changed. Because we were not just talking about conquering and reaching the peaks, but also difficult tracks were not attracting us. The point was how do we approach the mountains? What we are doing cannot be conveyed to that kind of an audience. We do expeditions where that is a possibility. The art of a traditional alpinism is not to die. This is not just an art, because that is a possibility. But if I remove that possibility, of course, it is not possible to die if I follow already prepared and set track. Of course, this is something silly, and maybe someone that doesn't want to die follow this prepared track. A smart person does not behave like that, but it is clear, it is evident that the point was conquering useless thing. Why are we doing to do that? Because we are able to make these things full of sense, full of meaning. And the meaning, the sense, is made up of many things. Something can be useless, but can be the most important thing for me in this period. And I was able to make the things full of sense, differently from others. I was creating the sense. Sense is not just falling down from the sky. We make sense in our projects, in our life. People were able to identify themselves in the things that they are doing. Heart just not lays in dreaming and doing. Art is having ideas. From ideas, you make projects, and then you carry out your projects. Here is the point, and these lead us to live successfully on that moment. I'm 80, almost 18, and it doesn't make sense to just recalling everything and my experiences and finding the sense. Today, I'm looking for new chases, new challenges, new possibilities, new methods to express myself, and I will do it until it will be possible to me. I'm not just laying down to block something, to criticize others, to change word. I just follow my dreams. I'm here in Biella. Maybe I visited Biella for the first time in 1975 after climbing Brashar Murmura in Pakistan on a new track, quite difficult one. As an alpinist, which means coming there, no money, with the traditional equipment. After 3 weeks to get comfortable with climate condition, and the blood should adapt to that conditions. And then probably Enrico Frascei, the genius of Fila, invited me. And then from that year, I was sponsored by Fila, making me expressing freely. Try to, climb without any Sherpa, without any leaders and managers, without paving the way until the peak, but just exploring the wild areas, the unexplored areas of the mountains, the new tracks, so that I had the possibility to invent, together with Fila Group, new clothes, new equipment that have been then copied by others. I have also worked for lighter traction cleats, leaving apart vast majority of the material that I was using before. We were faster than others. The role of my mother. It is fundamental to understand. My mom gave me and many brothers and sisters. We were carrying the young brothers, but she never stopped us. Let's imagine that we were just 14, 16 years. At the 3 in the morning, she prepared breakfast for us, and she never said, "Hey, be quiet and pay attention. I do not want you to climb," and so on. She never knew about the possibility to come back home. Maybe you can die, of course, while you are climbing. We were not experts, but she never stopped us. And this trust, this confidence that she gave us was fundamental for me, because I projected this kind of confidence into wildness, into wild nature and environment, so that I climbed with no fears, no warnings and concernings, exploring the world. In 1978, I climbed the Everest without mask, and through this experience, I knew that all the 8,000 peaks were possible without mask. You must try. Science, medicine was thinking that, okay, you cannot climb that altitude without mask. According to some studies, men and human beings can reach just 8,500 meters because the pressure was too low. But testing and trying and studying by myself on real, I found out that for us it was quite possible to reach the next and the last steps. It is difficult, of course, without mask, but mountains changes. Mountains grows with a slow pace, and of course, step by step, stopping, resting, and then another step. It was kind of mental condition. And so that I decided to push myself, to push my mental strength. And I think that everybody reaching their own limits can base the mental strength compared to the physical one.
After the Everest, I started studying the Himalayas myth. This also happened on the Alps before, but these myths and legends disappeared, and on the Himalaya they are still there. Local people in Nepal and Tibet think that on high mountains the gods are dancing, which is also true, because the gods are natural forces, winds and clouds, and they are much more alive in the highest mountains, beyond 8,000 meters than on a plane. After climbing in New Guinea and South America, and also in Antarctica, I left not because I lacked further challenges, but because I felt that I wanted to go where other people had been. So I crossed the poles. First, I went to South America, towards the South Pole, and then on the other side until New Zealand, up to New Zealand, 2,800 kilometers in cold weather, with winds, with my campaign Fuchs. Each of us had a slate, a 150 kilograms backpack, and materials to melt the snow, and also food, of course, and our harnesses. And in 192 days, we crossed a world that was incredibly wide. We felt that we were living on another planet, knowing that most of the ice on the planet is concentrated in Antarctica. 86% of the ice is still there. And it is quite certain that in the next thousands of years it won't melt. Maybe a part of it will, but some will remain. On highest mountains, the ice is melting, is going away, but on the Alps, maybe in some decades, there won't be ice anymore, which will change not only the look of the mountains, but it will certainly change the balance of waters. That is probably the basis of life, of all lives. But it is really important to understand that this happens as a consequence of global warming, which increased in the latest 200 years by making use of low-cost energy to carry out our industrial businesses that made us rich. I have not only crossed the poles and the now North Pole, where ice is really disappearing fast. I have also crossed some deserts, like the Gobi deserts, the Taklamakan. I felt strong physically, despite I had lost 7 toes. I remained intact in spite of the freezing of the frost in my toes. So I wanted to do something different with my life. 2 years ago, with my wife Diane, we founded a foundation with which we help the mountain people of the world, especially with schools in areas where the governments can't open them. I have a small startup with the name Mountains Heritage, which means that I want to take everywhere, in any area where Alp climbers are, new ways, because I don't want people to forget about the conventional climbing. It would be a shame if this way of climbing mountains was forgot. We would lose direct experiences in nature, in the wilderness, and a meeting between the human nature and the wilderness, the nature of the poles, of the deserts, of the wildest areas in the world. The meeting with the wilderness, as they put it in America. I had another expedition in Ethiopia before the Corona crisis, where the mountains look like the Dolomites a little bit, but they have these cliffs. And so I went there to study how these populations live, how they can survive. And being able to grow a mountain museum. With other means, I was telling some stories. So one book is a means, and a conference is another, and also a museum is a way to tell the people this story with objects, remains, vestiges, and so this is not over yet. I hope I will be healthy enough and with enough energy to be able to finish it next year. With local people, I have a very close relationship. A relationship of great respect. I really want to take their modes of life here. So I also made a museum on the mountain people of the world in Brunico, and also concerning the Walser populations, the people in South Tyrol. They have different ways of saving their families, but they all have in common a similar attitude towards the mountains where they live. They manage their own mountains. They do not depend on any outer business, because this is the way they have survived for hundreds of years. A first project with this startup, Messner Mountain Heritage, was done in Ali Sherpa. I gave the Sherpas that were neglected in alpinism. Those who came back from the mountains spoke of themselves, of the white heroes that came from America, from Europe, or from Japan. But these Sherpas that did a lot of work to make us climb the peaks were neglected. And so this museum tells about not only how the Sherpas came from Tibet to Nepal approximately 500 years ago, but it also tells about what they have done for the British people and for tourists from all over the world. They helped them do what they actually could do. One last museum is the one that I am going to finish in Mount Helm, on the vertical mountains of the Dolomites, and in front of a cableway. So the back of the museum is growing, and then when you go inside, I will tell you what I have to say about the mountains. There will be a museum on the glaciers, one on the sacred mounts, one on tourism, and this will be on the rocks. It will be called Rocca. It is a word in Latin. We speak Latin, German, and Italian there, and this Rocca word can also be the same in Spanish. But it is very important for me to give back to the local population what they deserve. So I make use of their own language. What they're doing is quite weird, but it is a project that maybe tells us about sustainability. This is the base camp, a station that is upstream a cableway. This cableway is not used anymore because it is too old. It was changed with a new way, a new chairlift, and they wanted to dismiss it. I could stop it. And so they left it where it was. And maybe with not so much money, they will be able to make a different use of it. So all the materials that were there will not be dismissed. We can leave the structure, we can leave the facility and maybe change it a little bit. It will be seen that it had been a cableway before. So there is the upper station at a little bit higher than 2,000 meters height, just high enough to see the real rocks. I think it is the peak number 9, number 11. So in the end, I will have a chance through the great windows that will be there, where the cableway would come in and out, and now the windows allow people to give back some pieces of nature that tell me what I have inside with my means, my art, quotations, and especially objects and remains of famous climbers that left them there. This is a small castle where I put the sacred mountains. It is in a place where on the right-hand side towards the north you can see what used to be considered a sacred mountain. And inside I tell about some sacred mountains, not all of them. Also here in Biella you have one. But I tell that sacred mountains actually are what people millions of years ago left us and passed on to us as a question mark. They tell us that the mountains have a meaning beyond the need and the use that we can make of them. The use is of no use, actually. We all know what is useful, but not everybody understands the value of the useless. I have studied all my life by walking at a normal pace, because that way you can really understand the world with your own feet and hands. I understood that men always respected the mountains because they contain a divine dimension. Many times I was stuck in my activities, many times in my life, and also the museum that I started, and that was my own idea. Maybe one of the most important of my life was stuck for approximately 10 years. So I am now nearly 80. I have a bent back, but I am not in a cage. When I was a child, I wanted to search for new realities beyond the horizon, and I remain a walker that goes around to see what is there beyond the next horizon. And I know that behind the horizons are endless. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you. Right in time. We are all breathless in front of your presentation, those who love the mountains and those who are less familiar with the peaks. As we agreed, we can now open a question and answer period. So we have 25 minutes for a debate. If anybody has a question, you can think about it, so we can then maybe give you a microphone. One question will be mine. As a journalist, I can't contain myself. From the images that we saw and that we see every day of these base camps on very crowded peaks, lines to go up, the fact that conquering peaks is also now a question of being able to afford that financially, those concerning the climbing of peaks, but also the lack of culture of those who go and hike at more than 2,000 meters without knowing what the mountain is. All these pictures reminds us that maybe we are losing the culture of the mountains. What do you think that should be done to recover all those values that you mentioned before? In my experience, I went to the Himalaya many times, also in the last few years. It is like that. There's a group of people, maybe a million people, who really go there to live with the local people. They stay with the local people in their houses and or in very simple lodges. And these people really want to understand how they can do that at 5,000 meters, how they can live with their means. How can they take their animals to pasture nearly on vertical slopes? That happens in the Apennines, and in the Alps we have a different culture. Unfortunately, along the years we are losing some farmers because they can't do that anymore. And the wolves are destroying a part of the malgas on some pastures where there were sheep. In some valleys in Cuneo, there were hundreds of sheep at the pastures, and their wool was then sold, and the meat was also enjoyed. But now there's a pack of wolves that is destroying in one night only 30 sheep. And politics have not faced that. There are no laws that can face that situation so that farmers can go on. If we don't have a European law or an Italian or a South Tyrolean law to face that, how can we deal with that? Farmers will leave the valleys, and then the valleys will be destroyed. Not just a lodge or a cabin where the farmer lived, but also the land, because then the water will erode the land. There will be landslides in spring. All the grass will be removed, and we won't be able to bring this culture. This culture is 1,000 years old. This man lived 500, 300 years ago, and we don't know how he lived. We only know how he died. But why did he go there? He went to the Alps from south to north. He could bring his sheep. For thousands of years we have moved the sheep. That was the customs, and in autumn they would go back to the valley. On the other hand, this is the interest for the culture of the mountains. But now I am very much more interested in this dimension than in the peaks. Now, there are people who buy a journey to the base camp and then to the peak, and if everything works out well, also the way back. If they want to have TV and sauna at the base camp, you can have a 5-star hotel, but if you are happy with a simple bed, it's cheaper. And we have hundreds of people, tourists, that want to do that, but they are not going to walk to the base camp. They all make use of helicopters. Some of them at night go down with the helicopter to have dinner in a restaurant. And at the base camp there are 5 beds and 5 places for the helicopters going up and down. So it's nearly as at Milan airport. That is really horrible. And there are 200 Sherpas who go there and prepare the track. A very hard job. They have to prepare the track from the base camp to the peak with deposits. They buy food. They have ladders. And then there are cooks, doctors, guides who take this group. And then it becomes a long line of climbers, maybe 100, all in a line. And every year, approximately 20 people die. Sometimes it is not in the news, but many Sherpas also died in their work because they have to stay there for a long time, and the possibility that there's an avalanche is high. It's all imbalanced. Our world is imbalanced. Yet that is the perpetual fight between tourists. And I am not particularly fond of them, of that word, and travelers who have a pure experience. So they also have care, take care of the place they are and of other people. Maybe that is getting lost. Is there anybody else who has thought of a question that they want to ask? So don't be shy. I know you have questions. So it's just about time for you to break the ice. Nobody wants to ask anything? Great. Can we pass the mic down there?
Buonasera, per iniziare.
Good evening. First of all, my question is simple. Do you have an electric car or a hybrid car? No, I don't. I don't have any car. I only have my enthusiasm to make my possibilities come true. I do what I like doing, what makes me happy, and this is why I changed my life 6 times. I reinvented myself 6 times. I was a traveler. In 1965, I would never dream of going to the Everest mountain. But then I was given if I had been given a chance, I would say no. I love the rocks. I wanted to climb rocks, and I wanted to find harder ways, harder and harder, especially on the Dolomites. Then I became a high mountain climber, and that is when I lost 7 toes due to frosting. I could not climb as I did before. I could never reach the level I had before that. And I remember this talk I had with my brother. Where are we going next? And when I came back on my own for 1 year, I had been out of balance. And then I learned how to live with this responsibility that was mine because I was the elder brother. And I started realizing and making our common dreams come true. I had the feeling that he left me with his energy so that I could carry out my life. In a third life, I did these long journeys, the South Pole, the North Pole, walking. Then I started studying the sacred mounts, also due to the fact that I broke my heel and I could not do some expeditions, so I started studying in all the continents, also with the mountain populations, the mountain people. I studied and climbed the sacred mountains in Australia, everywhere where it was legitimate. In some places it is forbidden to climb some holy mounts, such as the Kaish. And then I started making films to tell about alpinism, about the way I see it. And so I took up these great opportunities, but also this great challenge that is the greatest that you can face. Tell about the mountain in a facility. And I did it taking the chance to fail. I had some houses available in the province of Bolzano, but I had to fill it and carry it out without any aid. So we are self-sufficient, as I was in everything I did in my life. Thank you.
To answer to your question, this is a virtual car fueling with enthusiasm. Okay, is there another question? Yes. Mr. Masner, I would like to ask you that you climbed the highest rock in Australia. Is it true? Yes, I was lucky because I had the possibility to climb the highest rock in Australia. Now it is forbidden. It's a nice story, actually. Uluru, it is also called. Yes, the natives were saying that this is a sacred mountain. When white people said, okay, let's try to climb it. We do not touch the mountains, but we will try to create some tracks. Natives said, no, it is not possible. Just silence is possible and allowed. So that we started, and they actually started struggling with lawyers and judge. And then sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong. But at the end, lawyer for white people asked to the lawyer of natives, why you do not want to enable somebody to climb? Because nothing is living there. On the peak of the highest rock, there is nothing. So lawyer said, okay, nothing is there, so why are you defending the mountain? Because nothing is the greatest gift that we have, because still you have to feel it. Thank you very much. Yes, we have still time to make other questions. Thank you very much for your presentation and for all the things that you have done during your life. But my question is, what do you suggest? Because everybody is working for environment, but we always lay on the ideas, how to do differently, how to be concrete, how to put something in action really. Yes, we should be careful in Europe, but also somewhere in other continents, because it could be possible that from these ideologies, it could be possible to see some sect arising, and these can bring to civil war. I've been saying that for 2-3 years. We should be careful. Just giving an example, maybe we have already forgotten it. 30 years ago, more or less, we started to use the spray on the house. This is great art. Artists using the spray bottles, painting the walls of the houses. Yes, street arts. Today, nowadays, streets are dirty. I don't like it. I was in China. I traveled recently in China. China is totally clean, incredibly clean. In the 80s, I traveled to Chengdu, and the city was very poor. Nowadays, people live well. They are really positive people. They have a really positive attitude. And we gave to the children the sensation that everything is possible. They can do everything. They can destroy, they can test even bad methods. Now, these provoke hunger. This is something dangerous because we should say, okay, this cannot be done. This is forbidden. It is not just enough to accept everything. You can accept something, but you cannot accept people creating rules accordingly to their personal experience or own through some methods that destroy our society. They fight against each other and so on. So personally, I'm an optimistic person. Tomorrow, I come back home and I plant a seed for a tree. Thank you. Yes, maybe 10 minutes left. Last question. Okay, yes, here. Good morning. Among the expeditions that you've done, which is the one that you remind positively? And what do you think about the young alpinists? Is there somebody similar to your way of being a climber, as Bonatti, for example? Well, I'm starting from the last question. Bonatti represented an exception for his intelligence as writer, as alpinist, as traveler. Actually, he's a genius. And Bonatti, in Italy, was able to make people understanding mountains. This was, I think, the last traditional alpinist that we have had. My activity was different, actually. What I did was kind of differently as climber, traditional climber, and then traveler into the wilderness. He was able to travel to the ice and glacier, then reach the peak of Monte Bianco, and then again. My ability was focusing on just one single activity for a certain period of time. He was super versatile. He was able to travel around the world, reaching the most difficult tracks. Today, among the youngest climbers and rockers, we can find something, we can find somebody very clever, but people actually do not understand the difference between the climber reaching the peak through the Sherpa or those who open a new track on a high mountains. My favorite alpinist, as a philosopher, as a writer, he really did great excellent thing is Kortika from Poland. Alpinists know him, mountaineers know him. As Hunold Ostecht, unfortunately, he already passed away. They are super talented, and nobody in my generation had that kind of skills. But they are specializing in just single sector in it. When I was young, when I was 22, 23 years, the slide of Civetta Mountains, the great slides of the 6th grade, was our goal. It accounts for 1,200 meters, many tracks in. And in 1967, reaching Civetta slide, I tried 20 slope groups. And then you were following your own track to be sure that you were climbing safely. Today, in just one summer, seeing a rope team is something extraordinary, because the majority of mountains, up to 6,000, 7,000, have been in touch. Everybody goes to Everest, where somebody else prepares the track, and then the helicopter can bring you up to the base camp. So they are not just caring about local communities. This is totally different, because 30 years ago, if somebody would have asked me, okay, as an alpinist, can describe your activity, my description, my explanation would be totally different. So that 2 years ago, I started this startup project, bringing forward a good and positive narrative and the philosophy of alpinism. Alpinism is not sport. It is not a sporting activity. It's culture, it's a tension, I have already said it, between human nature and mountain nature. This is something about philosophy. It's something about culture. No sporting activity is linked to alpinism, which produced high-quality books. The Conqueror of the Useless, and the awareness of what death is, because in front of death, life becomes relative. This means that if you do something in an area, in a place where that is possible, I find out and realize that everything is useless, so that I can just overcoming this sensation and negative feeling, giving sense with the enthusiasm that I personally give and put. So that means that in front of that, which brings our life to a... I do not find the word, sorry. It is not knife, it's something... Sorry. I can't find it. Something related to existence, so that in front of that, we find out that life, generally speaking, does not make sense, but it works doing what I want to do, which means following my dreams, drawing my dreams, leaving apart what I do not want to do, what I do without enthusiasm, seeing other reasons. The reasons for economic success is totally secondary, because if I express myself as best as I can, following my personal vocation, I'm paving the right way. And we should educate our children, our youngsters. Follow your way. once you have found your enthusiasm, where you have the possibility to express yourself as best as you can, well, you have found the key for success in your life, the key for joy. This is not the conquest of useless, but of useless. Yes, follow your dreams. It becomes useful, of course. Wow. We would like to stay with you for a long time, but I think that you should go. It's 4 o'clock. We're really sorry, but we have to thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to greet you. Thank you.
E noi andiamo avanti ancora con il programma del forum, se non andate via tutti.
Okay, so let's go on.
Andiamo avanti, dicevo, con il programma del forum.
Let's follow the agenda. We are the 2 guests that somehow are related to mountains and the culture of mountains, so that I would like to invite Angelo Schena about the Central Committee of CAI and Giuseppe Priolo, President of the Central Commission of Speleology.
Prego. Allora, questo è per voi. Allora.
Here you are. So, we have already prepared some questions. Of course, we have already talked together with Mr. Messner. But I would like to face the issue of the culture for mountains. So Mr. Schena has, for lovers of mountains, hiking, walkers, of course, this is an icon and a symbol of the possibility to track the mountains. But as we said before, unfortunately, we are experiencing a decrease of participation of lovers, of travelers, and hikers. Is something possible to rebuild this culture for mountain? Well, first of all, of course, I would like to answer to your question, but of course, I have already talked in a congress where I was talking with Messner, but I was talking before Messner and the audience was super full. But now it is difficult because, of course, the audience is quite empty, and it is difficult because Messner, of course, is excellent. I would like to greet you all also by Antonio Montani, but unfortunately he cannot be here, so that I'm here on behalf of him. But I do not drink water, so I cannot understand why I'm here instead of him. I just drink beer, and for the thing, for having Menabrea beer, maybe that could be the reason. Just to answer to your question, according to the culture of for mountain, CAI, the Italian Alpine Club, has fundamental pillars according to the Article 1 of our regulation, so knowing mountains and also protecting mountains environment. But of course, in these rules, it is evident that also belonging to the history of the club, dating back to 160 years ago, the main role was played by culture. The club was born in 1863, and at the beginning was the conquer, as Messner said before, but also the scientific research, so that analyzing rocks and mountains and so on. Accordingly to that, great literature and knowledge has been widespread, and many alpinists and hikers then wrote down their experiences and reflections in some books that then had been issued. The Italian Alpine Club is continuing that great activity of widespreading culture, so that first you should know mountains, because through knowledge you can love mountains, and just loving something you can protect it. That is the environmental protection. This is one of the main pillars of our statute, of our charter, so that these activities is carried out through the activities of the club that are carried out by the single section, through the courses that every year they organize, speleology, alpinism, and so on. Many courses are delivered every year, and during the lessons, of course, the debate is focused on ideas, on values, on cultural values about mountains. And then another cultural activities that we carried out is made by initiatives, meetings with writers, climbers, books. Everything is addressed to culture, so that the possibility to make people understanding the right approach to mountains, also the protection of mountains, but also being safe, trekking, hiking, and climbing. It is true that many experts are living in mountains. Sorry for interrupting you. I'm not Mesner. I'm not an hiker, but people were walking in the mountains with flip-flops. But of course, yes, they do not know mountains. People approaching our courses, living our environment and our experience, of course, have the possibility to approach the mountain differently. Again, zero risk does not exist. Even though you travel by plane, by cars, so accidents are always possible, even in climbing mountains. But of course, the most important thing is talking and discussing about the measures and the strategies that you have to implement to be safe and to approach the mountain safely. Of course, what happened in Marmolata cannot be forecasted. This was a great avalanche that cannot be, of course, that cannot be forecasted. Yes, of course, science can try to study the mountains through sensors, because with the heat waves and climate change, of course, ice below the mountains, between the rock and the mountain, of course, was melted down, so that plate was missing. Of course, this was the process. Yes, the same applies to landslides. Yes, but actually landslides have been always censored, the majority of landslides. But yes, ice is something new within this strategy. I have a question, because I think that this is something easy, but not expected, because beyond the books that you, beyond the members of the club, which is the perception in relation to the members who wants to approach the club? Because I think, maybe this is my personal point of view, the vast majority of members of this club is aged between 50, elderly people. They are not youngsters, and very young people are not interesting, or maybe are not attracted by this kind of activity, because walking is kind of making philosophy. Do you think that youngsters are walkers? represent a population of hikers, or it is something different according to your opinion?
It is clear that, generally speaking, young people prefer to climb. Generally, those who go to the mountains prefer climbing. But I would say that no, well, I know a lot of people who go to the mountains, and I see a lot on the tracks. You mentioned the CAI track. That is the longest trekking from Santa Teresa di Gallura in Sardinia until Muggia, after Trieste, past Trieste. It is 7,800 kilometers, and it crosses all Italy and then the southern part of the Alps, starting from Sicily, etc. This path was designed in the late 80s. Teresio Valsesia and Giancarlo Combellini intervened, and they had this idea of a single path joining a little bit of all the mountains in Italy. This with the development, on the one hand, of walking, hiking, but also to valorize villages and places that were a little bit marginal. So we mentioned the problem of depopulation of the mountains, and so it was thought that this might be a new way to keep people in the mountains or in some places. And this happened in some situations because walkers or hikers go to these villages, and so that is interesting from a touristical point of view. And hiking is more and more popular. The most popular walk is the Camino de Santiago, and then there is the Francigena Way, the Marian Way. There are many. The Franciscan Way. There really are many. The God's Way. Yes, in Campania. No, the path of gods is between Bologna and Florence. Yes, the way of gods, yes. Oh, yes, the other is the path of gods. So these are also activities that we are doing. In Italy, we started in the 80s, and then it was experimented at the beginning of this century. And there was a strong relaunch, a strong revival in 2018, so just before COVID. And that is also a tool or a method, in my opinion, to create a culture of the mountains. Because you go there looking for beautiful sceneries, for relaxing places, interesting villages, but you can also discover villages, food, wines, on all the mountains in Italy. And I think that would imply and would be also valid to make people know the mountains and love the mountains and all these areas. So these slow ways of living the mountains could maybe be an alternative to... We also mentioned the Olympic Games, the fact that there's no more snow, and so mountains must be enjoyed differently compared to the past. Maybe new ways will also be opened, and this is a valid alternative. Well, if you want me to speak of the Olympic Games, the position of CAI was that when the Olympic Games were allocated to Italy, in CAI we have an environmental agency. We have a central commission for the protection of the mountain environment. And of course, they replied that these Olympic Games would be fully sustainable because they said that all the facilities were already there. In spite of this, a roundtable was created between several associations of environmental protection. We were there, but there were also more associations. The Milano Cortina Milano Association and the Silico, that is the society that is the company that is in charge of the infrastructures. And our wish was to be able to discuss with these entities in order to express our assessment, our opinion on the environmental compatibility of this. Unfortunately, things didn't work out very well, especially because the documentation was never made available to us. Quite recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, there was one last meeting of this table, and the environmental protection associations declared that they would not participate anymore, so they would retire from it. As an Italian Alpine Club, we would like to keep the negotiations open and maybe have some more interviews with them, but it is going to be difficult. Absolutely. So thank you. And in the meantime, let me leave the floor to Mr. Priolo, the president of the Central Commission for Speleology of the Italian Alpine Club. He is also passionate about volcanology. Today we speak of water a lot, also because it is the central topic of the day. And CAI has an important project on water, on which I would like to ask you. And then I also read that in December you are going to present some report about it. Is there any anticipation on it? Any preview? You can tell me if you can do it or not, but we really would like to know what is the object of it and what is the goal of it. First of all, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon. The question is quite simple, but the answer is complex. We might see some pictures, so my speech will be quicker. The idea of CAI started approximately 1 year ago on the occasion of the Speleologist Congress. So people who have a deep relation with water. As caves and streams, in 90% of cases, are born from water. So if you think that our world is basically made of water, this is the climate risk situation. And I think that facing the topic of water for those who need water to go on a stream, to canoeing, or to go to caves, well, this comes from our reflection. We have also been mountaineers before. I was also a mountaineer, and then when I moved to Sicily, I was called by the volcanoes in my studies and by volcanic caves, and so I stayed there. But at the end of this reasoning on the cycle of water, so what the journey, what that water makes is, today we heard about precipitation and all the rest, but we often have a problem that this cycle is very short. And I read it differently. And then there's the detail. Before 50 years ago, there were no social media, so we read the news on the newspapers, and at the cinema, before that, and then on TV. So consider that this cycle is crucial. This is what happens in a karstic environment. You see, water is the driver of this system. This is a karstic environment. This is Mexico. This is a cenote in the area of Quintana Roo. And this is the use we make of water. This is the picture of a local reality. We are not very far away from this picture. I took it close to this place. And we don't have a right idea of water. So the CAI decided that they should make a move, and we discussed with doctors and speleologists, because water actually is the best medicine we have. And so for those who don't know it, this is our structure. So we mainly deal with maps and paths. So we had this new project that is called Spring Water. And we want to involve hikers and CAI members, so our present and our future, with canoeists and mountaineers. So it was started as an idea to identify the springs that are known, but this is no novelty. All the public entities should have a map or a database of the springs. Some exist, but data are not always updated. Sometimes we have data dating back to 1962, so we don't know where water comes from. We do know it, but we have a faraway memory of it. So maybe a spring that was good in the 1960s is not there anymore, or is not good anymore. So what we're going to do is this, and we have already started the first tests. With a very simple smartphone, we can locate a spring. We use the waypoint, and we will take a beautiful picture of the spring with our smartphone again. With a bottle of water, we will take a reliable measurement, so we know how much water the springs is putting into the territory. And then we have a tool that is worth €60, and that CAI is giving to all the sections that want to participate. And with this, we can measure the temperature and the ionic component of this water, so how many minerals there are. This is done superficially, but the speleologists are going to do the same under the ground. So we are going to measure groundwater. We are now taking the temperature of the groundwater in a cave in Sicily. Here we are in Posea, and we are tracking the substances absolutely harmless. It is just picturesque, so we can see what it is. At the end of this, we are going to collect data that will give information on these environments, and they will be made public. But we will do it with the help of our members. So our people, those who are not so young anymore, as you said before, it is true that the average age of CAI members is high and is going up. But it is also true that young people might prefer other experiences, and then with growing up, they will prefer hiking or walking. Now they prefer canoeing or other activities or other sports. The result will be that we will have a continuing information in this public database that is already interfacing with a database from public administration. So we will start from those data, and we will monitor them with one passage every 3 months. So for the first year, we will also have a seasonal definition of the springs. And with all the information that we can have, we will be able to know if the spring is active all year round, if it is seasonal, if it is ephemeral, and if it is not there anymore, which often happens. Or we will find springs that we didn't know because they were born later. Please remember that the Earth is a dynamic mechanism, so where there used to be a dry object, now we might have a spring. There may be a contact with an object or a trap or a tectonic movement can create a spring. So we have to think of a dynamic movement. And this is what we want to collect today to be able to pass on to our children tomorrow or our grandchildren these emotions and this information for a better future. Because what I like to think is that the earth was lent to us. We are borrowing it and we are passing it on to our children, and they will also borrow it from someone else. So this is the aim of CAI. But you also asked me about the results. Yes, I have a more specific question. How many springs have you mapped? And at national level, is there any area that is particularly rich in springs? Concerning rich or less rich areas? If I go looking for springs in a karstic area, I might not find many, because karstic areas have groundwater, so the water goes underground. As a speleologist, I'm very happy about it. But in some areas, there are many springs, like in the valleys of the Alps, but also in the Apennines, there are many springs. Then you must also remember that there must be a stratigraphic situation that allows us to map them. There must be a moment where a permeable, where a waterproof layer does not allow water to spring out. I'm from Sicily. I can tell from your accent. I am from Catania, to be precise. And I ought to say that on the Etna mountain, there are no springs, for a simple reason, because the stratigraphic contact between volcanic rocks that are permeable and the clay basement is at approximately 2,000 meters of depth. So we have no surface springs, but we have them on the banks of rivers. To the Alcantara to the east and Simetro to the west. And considering the work that we have already done, we are in an early stage. So at the end of November at the CAI Congress in Rome, we will bring a whole set of structured information that will tell about 30 monitoring actions. This is widespread in the whole of Italy, because we are now testing the system so that we can later put it in the hands of all our members. There are 345,000 of them. So you see how much information we can have and make available for the society. So it is open science. Whenever possible, I prefer to use the Italian word, that is the popular science that we are going to share. And this is a winning tool because it is now allowing us to collect information on the territory. And some people are very competent. Some are geologists, biologists. So people who have skills and a background, so they can provide useful information. And this information, as in any scientific work, must be made public. A work that is not public, in my opinion, has no value, because it is not based on debate, critics. If I have a scientific proposal, I must face it with others. So I must make all this information public, and then if they are claimed against, that's fine, but we did our part. And this does not only apply to CAI. All the associations that deal with hiking, with the mountains, are invited to cooperate. The more we are, the more data we can collect. Before saying goodbye to you, a temporary information. This is our first stage of monitoring. How long will it take to have a realistic picture of the springs in Italy? How long do you think it might take? Well, if it was a contract job, we could hire 30,000 detectors and work all over Italy. But it is volunteer work. And this beautiful project is also matched with another project by CAI that includes the construction of a lab in Bolsena and another one in Pordenone that will work and receive these data on the springs to analyze the chemical and physical features of this water with a trackability that can be used with different substances. The purple one, yes, last time you might have heard that there was a scandal in Venice. That is a tracking substance used by plumbers. So someone lost it. Yes, maybe the plumber was short-sighted. He needed some help, or maybe he just dropped the bucket. Instead, we will be working with gas and aromas and fragrances. You will be able to carry your deodorant, spray some in the cave, and define the path of air and also of water in that cave, because it is caught by a detector that is activated carbon. Then you analyze these carbons, and CAI, as always, had been very long-sighted. There's many of us. That's very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. An applause for our guests.
Grazie. Allora, adesso procediamo spediti.
So let's go on with the last panel of today. 3 round tables focused, of course, on the common theme related to sustainability and the strategies to face and struggle with climate change. We are getting used to the first round table. Maybe it's the most participated one because it collects private sector and companies, so that I would like to invite on the stage Mr. Ercolo Bottopaola by Reda and President of Confindustria Moda, Alessandro Botta by Lanificio Drago, responsible of Communication Department of Lanificio Drago. First comes first served. Matteo Cerroglio by Bottega Verde, Andrea Bonino by Botala Formaggi, the president of the Lidl Committee, Regional Committee, with a delegation for supply chain, Mr. Giulio Enoch, managing director of Bedesso Bertotto Retail. Good evening, welcome. Here we are. Okay. I would like to share with you common issues. So we start by Mr. Bottopaola. The greatest challenge within these scenarios characterized by rapid climate changes and great impacts is lowering environmental impact of production pipeline of your activities. Is it possible to do that? And maybe, of course, one of you will answer according to your activity. It is possible to implement that kind of strategies in your production pipeline? Well, according to my opinion, this is an incorrect question, because it is not important understanding which are the technologies to cut the impact, but it's understanding what we are thinking when we talk about impact as far as European regulations are concerned, because the point is that European rules start from some certain premises. Maybe they are correct, maybe they are incorrect, but upstream of the reflection, there are some issues that we should face. Our territory is very famous for wool production, and maybe the impact of the footprint of a company, the 80% of this footprint is not managed by the company, but is given upstream by animals, so that it is difficult to measure and to invest in this, because Europe, for example, assumes that in the calculation of the impact of synthetic fibers, do not consider the impact given by the oil extraction, so that oiling exists in nature, so that we do not have to calculate the costs for extracting it. Ships are animals. They are raised so that we should calculate also this kind of impact, the emissions of CO2. Why I'm saying that? Because today it is just simple to say, okay, what you are doing to cut your impact, to reduce your footprint. But the point is, which are the regulations that measure your company as virtuous or non-virtuous? So that when people are asking, so that a lot of people is wrong in making this question. Well, it's the ideological approach to this problem. No, I don't want to be incorrect. No, I'm talking about the storytelling of today's Congress. The point for company is, and this represents also a paradox, because these companies really invested a lot of money to reduce the impact and the footprint, but maybe the direction is wrong, because if I would invest it as a company in giving appeals to the animals, reducing the digestion process, I could be even more green compared to a company which invested million and million of euro in industrial technology, photovoltaic panels, reducing consumption, educating people to this kind of approach. So that this is interesting. This is a really interesting point of view. But considering what Europe could ask to the companies for future strategies, according to the plans related to sustainability, climate, environment, and so on. Having said that, which is the direction of your company? Well, studying and being formed, understanding and working to really catch the point, the right direction of the regulation. Because once we make choices, these choices have impact. Fashion industry ranked second for its environmental impact after the oil one. So that fashion industry is the one which is polluting more. Why? Because the past choices, of course, affect the present condition where we are here, which we are living. Choosing a fast fashion industry, it has been decided to produce according to certain standards in Europe, different from China's ones, so that the cost for production had increased in Europe. Companies decided to invest because, of course, sustainability in Italy costs a lot. The focus was on consumers rather on others, so it is important that consumers pay less the product that is fast fashion. And for years, we have been told that fashion should be democratic. This is fair. This is correct. Yes, accessing fashion with low prices. The consequences is that about 150 million garments, of course, then go to dump and so on. That produced well-being on those countries, but cause a negative impact in Biella. There are a few of us. Of course, 1/6 of world population live thanks to the fashion industry. So when the problem emerge and we say, okay, pay attention, we should produce less, we should consume less, all these choices will impact in the future. Yes, of course. Well, I would like to give the floor to you, the same question for you. Yes, Bottega Verde produces and trades cosmetic products, of course. The name is sustainable itself, because we have started our path when sustainability was not that a recurring theme, and we started investing in energy consumption and self-efficiency. This is not just a point of putting photovoltaic panels, but the great job was reducing energy consumption. Of course, cosmetics is something under the spotlight. Yes, of course, you're right. So that this was our aims, and thanks to technologies, domotics, LED lighting, and also retail production, we started working to reduce consumption, and we're trying to remove gases, especially for eating reason, because gas is a raw material, so that we should protect it. Energy and certifications, so the control of production processes. We have been registered according to an environmental certification measuring the impacts of our activities on the environment. Bathing creams, of course, affects a lot of this industry and should be monitored periodically. Also the emission to the atmosphere, because we are managing raw materials that should be protected and monitored. But also product itself, because we do not forget that a manufacturing company produces objects, produces items, articles, and these items are consumed by consumers. And in consumption, of course, in the consumption step, we create a kind of consequences. Water in cosmetics is an essential raw material because it's always present in our cosmetics. Of course, a company, in order to reduce water, can produce solid products, for example, solid shampoo, solid bathing soap, and so on, having a lower level of water. So while producing the products, I use less water. Then there is the topic of using water for the sanitation and cleaning of the structures. We have a purifier, but in order to recover wastewater with sludges and so on, we try to distill water and reuse it. A purified water, to reuse it during cleaning. But again, consumers, of course, if you examining the life cycle assessment of bathing soap, maybe we will find out that the vast majority of amount of water is not in charge of company, but is when the consumer has his shower, and you start opening water and tap, and then we wait for the right temperature, and then we take the shower for 40 minutes. Of course, that water cannot be compared to the water that we have used to produce the product as raw materials, as production pipeline. So that I think that the turning point, the commitment that a company should foster is educating consumers in saving resources and in this case, of course, saving water, so that envisaging some more sustainable projects using less resources with a low impact on environmental, but also implicating consumers. Yes, I do not want to interrupt you, but maybe as a communicator, I personally think that also in advertising, in marketing department, we should foster this concept because, okay, a company can say, hey, we are green, we are sustainable, but it would be useful also to educate people and consumer having a shower and lingering in washing themselves and so on. Yes, cosmetics have instructions explaining and describing the best use of the product. Of course, marketing should struggle in conveying this message to the final consumer, so the ideals of sustainability, good practices, because of course resources have been depleted. And just to close my intervention, as my colleague said before, the company has a direct impact on environment, but actually if you analyze the carbon footprint of the company, you find out and discover that maybe 80% of emissions have been released upstream. In our case, we are not talking about animals, but providers of packaging and the materials that in their production processes or in transporting the semi-processed products, of course, they generate CO2 emission and so on. So we are selecting providers according to sustainability criteria so that we write down our purchasing policy, matched it with the providers' contracts, asking to them a better analysis and assessment of their activities in managing environment and process so that we can choose and identify the right provider. Yes, the point is tracing the supply chain from the ideation of the product, the provider, company, consumer, but also waste again, because the point of recycling materials, reusing them, really this is a whole process that has been considered as a whole, because we create but consumers use our products and they close the cycle. So the economy should be circular also from a sustainable point of view.
Questo, prego.
Well, I can relate to what said those who spoke before me. As Drago Wall Mill, we also have some rules to abide. So a study and assessment is done in order to then proceed to invest in sustainability. The company has to invest in order to comply with all the rules. But this also led us to do some internal evaluations, especially concerning our own ideology. There are rules, some things are imposed upon us, and we have to abide, but we have also tried and develop a concept of our own. We start from a sustainability principle. Mr. Ercole said that before. Education of our workers, too, also in that respect. I always give this trivial example. It doesn't happen in our company because our manager is very careful with that, and he also educated all of us on that. But if I see scrap paper on the floor, there is a bin, and I don't lift it up, we have already missed all the value of what we work on in the idea of sustainability. So how hard is it to step down and collect the paper? That is the first step in the education of a person. And that's the basic. So we started from basic things. And I say this because I said this in 2019 at a PT event where they spoke of sustainability. And so we said, let us educate ourselves first. And let us educate the people that work with us. And then we can continue. Because if we have no basics, then the castle will just crumble. And one thing that I want to say concerning sustainability, Barbara was here with us some months ago, but Ercole was here too. We were in front of 400 tailors coming from all over the world. And I can tell you that the best possible sustainable chain is that we give our fabrics the excellence of our territory, because we have to be aware of the excellence of our product. It is all done in our plants, so it is controlled by rules that are given to us and that we also want to apply. We send these fabrics to the tailors who make work of art, customized for some people. Those dresses, those clothes will never die. They might be fixed, changed, but they will have a new life. So something that is more sustainable than that is hard to find. We can't even see the end of the product. The product goes on. Another example that was given by sales director at that congress. Everything starts from the Agnelli family. The same nephew of the lawyer that we all know, who reproposed some suits of his grandfather on himself. So this is the tailor-made world. And so the valorization of our fabrics and how long they last. And these garments that are handmade by tailors and that take up new life every time. Regardless of that, of course, a high tailorship has a road of its own, but everyday garments, everyday clothes that are sold by retail, do you think that second-hand shops and retail and recycle can work? Do you think that fabrics can be reused or recycled? Many companies, also big companies, are pursuing that policy. Yes, that is one of the crucial topics of the last few years, this circular economy, this reuse also in fashion of some products, some fabrics, and raw materials at the same time. I do believe, but I also have to study and evaluate and prepare a concrete project. Words are not enough. We can tell a lot about it, but let's do something concrete. Let's see what can be done also in recycle. So we have to study and assess also that approach. Okay, you can pass the microphone. Well, listening to my colleagues, of course, they know the territory, so their companies took shape and became very important internationally. Also thanks to the water our territory gave. This element that provides life, but in our case, it also gives life to our companies and businesses. In my field, food, we have also been through different stages. There was the search of some multinational companies to make products that were not so much linked to the territory. But now I think that the supply chain and in our territories, I think that I have to refer to the territory of Biella, where we work together with farmers and breeders, and so we have some milk from here, and then we turn this into cheese. But all this makes us reflect upon the fact that our chain starts from the mountains, so upstream, and then arrive downstream. And in order to be all aligned, we must identify common goals. In our companies, we all have the goal of creating not only productivity, but a healthy productivity. So we want to have in our company a respect of nature and what the climate changes impose on it. I think we should also reflect upon what happened in the last few years. Although not everybody agrees with us or behaves like us. So we ought to think that this country, our culture, our history might help us reflect upon how to face tomorrow, not just save energy or save water, which is important. In our field, there are facilities that might save from 20 to 50% of water with the 4.0 industry. And this is something that we are all trying to exploit to be competitive and make healthy products that can also be purchased. But I believe that those who suffer climate changes in the first place, that is agriculture, of course, the first who are affected if there's no grass is the farmers or breeders, because animals can't be fed, or milk is 80% water. We have to turn this milk into cheese, and the solid part might be turned into cheese, and the liquid part, that is a serum, can be used to make ricotta in Italy, or can be recycled as a whey is also used for the cosmetic industry. So we are trying to reuse everything that can be used in the raw material. For sure, the owner of a company, of a business, but we all must adapt to the changes because we are forced to, but we must also look towards tomorrow and try and valorize our territory by being an example ourselves in our companies and in everyday life. We have to try and live as correctly as possible, and then other people will also do the same. Can you express some criticalities in the cheese sector that can be overcome with Industry 4.0? Well, I think we all do it also in the textile industry. We reuse water. We use it in dairy products. We use water in the first stage in processing, but also later in the washing for food security. And nowadays, with the evolution of the mechanic industry, thanks to control procedures and investments in Industry 4.0, you can have a full control. We are now finalizing a control plant that is really linked to this, the control and reuse of water, keeping the food security in the product. So this concerns the environment, but this is also a need of the company. So many things could be said. I was reading an article, and it said that in Italy we waste 25% more per capita compared to other European countries. Yes, it was said this morning. I don't know why. Maybe we wash ourselves more. But there might also be a problem of dispersion, of loss. But 25% more is a lot, isn't it? But this is a transformation, and before nature adapts, a lot of time will go by, but we have to do our best. we all must do something to try and live this moment. When Messner said there's no balance. So when there's no balance, nothing can stand. And finding a balance in our business, in our life, with everything changing, is very complex. So let's try and make use of our wisdom and that of those who came before us, and look towards tomorrow with positivity. Thank you. So we can also close this table. Well, we deal not with a process procedure because we work in retail, which means distribution. We have stores. We take the garments that are produced partly where we process fabrics that are provided, that we buy from wool mills. So we process these fabrics and we sell them to the public. And then our sustainability and environmental conscience are sometimes proven by practical actions. Even in the transportation of these garments, that strongly affects the amount of waste that we produce, as often these manufacturers use virtuous processes of compliance, transformation, circular economy, prevention of pollution, but then the garments are transformed with padding, with some accessories that pollute even more than the fabric itself. Synthetic padding, and so on. And then there's a whole packaging that accompanies the product. So when it arrives in the stores, there's a mountain of wastes. A hanger is made by plastic and a metal hook. And I don't think you can detach these two parts. Yes, in green ecological places, there is the differentiation, but not everybody. So when you sell shirts, you have a lot of materials there. You have knits, meshes, carton, boxes. Also, our stores receive shirts in boxes. Every shirt has a box of its own. So you can imagine when we sell 2,000 shirts, we throw away 2,000 boxes. So behind the provision and fabrics that are respectful of our environment, there are big issues. We make a lot of waste. So we should see where the waste is, try and reduce the distances, and try and move the products to the stores with as little packaging as possible. Our collections are moving in this direction, so we are trying to make garments where the internal padding is made with recycled materials. And we prefer natural fibers such as wool, silk, cashmere, which are used inside these paddings that are applied on the fabrics with internal linings. And in the past, we have done some experiments in some collections of recycled yarns or fabrics in knitting or accessories. Last year, we made a collection that was related to Biella, this territory, as in Biella there's an archive of very old pictures. So we took these pictures and we made covers. We made blankets with it. And that the money we made was destined to some activities of the territory. And the Zignone wool mill is helping us with these recycled yarns. And with these yarns, we can make garments or fabrics that have a green footprint because they were recycled. And this is very important, in my opinion, both in padding, in the use of the lining, and also in the yarns that are used to create a new garment, a new apparel. What's important and is what technology can offer to increase this environmental awareness. We can tell these stories in the first instance. So we can endow the garments with tags or with tags that tell about all the story of clothes. So you can know all the production steps. And I think the stores or online distributors should also tell about all these efforts that we have been doing, that some manufacturers have done. So we made something more to offer a good quality product. Can you affect that chain of additional things that are put on shirts, like tags, nails, bags? Well, on formal shirt, it is very difficult because consumers are used to getting it this way, but maybe with a sport T-shirt that we can fold it as a sweater, and so we can make less use of those means, of those tools. But that segment is, I have never seen someone deliver shirt hanging on the hanger or all in one box. You can do that with some garments, but not with all of them. Unfortunately, some products must be delivered that way. You need some features for the shipping. Thank you. I would like to stay with you longer because this is interesting, but we have to carry on with other roundtables. So thank you very much indeed. Bye.
Allora, come si diceva, andiamo avanti col secondo.
Let's go on with the second roundtable. And let's talk about agriculture and issues related to this industry. Alessio Cocchi by Piedmont Confartigianato. Jonathan Pirali, President of CNA Biella. Paolo Guerrini, President of Coldiretti Vercelli and Biella. Sorry, it is wrong. Roberto Mercandino, sorry, this is a mistake, my mistake. We are at the end of the day, so sorry for this mistake. Then we have Augusto Borsetti of the Distretto Irriguo dell'Ingagna. Good evening. And Mr. Giorgio Macchieraldo from CEI Biella. Here we go. Yes, my questions are linked to impact on climate crisis, which affect production processes, but also if we want to say something about this news, the block of crops of wheat and corn, I actually do not have quite information. But if someone can help me orienting in this news could be useful. But those impact, of course, change time, ways of cultivating. Of course, crops meet natural cycles, so that the rhythm for productions are totally changed. So we should give up with some crops, maybe in some period of characterized by water shortage. Replacing those crops with others that requires less waters. How are you facing this current situation. The floor is yours. Well, the issue is essential, actually, is very important, but also heavy. Yes, we do just important and heavy things successfully, but of course, this is the way it goes. Well, for sure, climate change affects a lot our sectors. This is the first sector affected by climate change. Unfortunately, they say that maybe we represent the main cause for this climate change, and I totally disagree with this because, of course, we breed animals, we work with the gases, and we work in the soil, but of course, fuels and other elements, of course, actually create this impact. We should do our activities, we should be aware of this situation, and to be honest, unfortunately, today, we do not have faced and deal this situation seriously yet. This is not because we do not know the situation, but for economic reasons. It is difficult because it is difficult to say to a farmer, okay, stop using water. First, because no crops is possible to be cultivated without water. If some animals or some crops can work without water, maybe the hydroponic agriculture and crops, well, if we should reach those levels, it is important, it is fundamental to slow down the climate change, because if we work just on the hydroponic one, we should leave the territory, and then we should find resources to keep and maintain the territory, because crops also protect the territory in a concrete way. This is important because, irrigate lawn, mowing it, of course, is something which is protecting the territory. If we remove all this process, we just create a territory with no means, which will create floods and so on, and a kind of environmental degradation. Just to give an example about Biella, so the stream, Cervo stream. In Cervo stream, there are some streams and rivers taken to irrigate crops and territories, lawns, breeds that are linked to this water. But for sometimes the care was given to the protection of river, trying to reduce the prevalence of water to keep animals and vegetation. So that during summer, we are forced to increasingly reduce the withdrawal of water. This is an important reflection, since we should protect the whole territory and the whole river. But once we have protecting the river, how do we keep it unchanged? It is a paradoxon. We should find the right balance, because each area should find its own balance. Otherwise, we try to sort out the problems, creating other problems. I really appreciated the intervention given by the companies before, because they really understood and catch the point. We should reduce the impact that we personally generate. And as Mr. Ercole Bottopoala said before, we are doing our activity, of course, but upstream, For example, in that case, the ship creates a higher impact. Of course, it is impossible to reduce those impacts just by our own. We should create a whole supply chain. Farmer, businessmen, distributors, create a complete circuit and complete network, and then together we reduce network so that we can also divide revenues, because revenues cannot just calculate it downstream but also upstream, the initial effort. I think that this is the point. Yes, I would like to know something about this European decision about block of these crops. Well, I think that this is a fake news. Actually, it is not. Well, European Commission released those regulations called the PAC, so that starting from 2024 up to 2027, we should comply with some rules, the rotation of the territory, so that corn, soy, the left aside process. So in the Po Valley, of course, we can cultivate this kind of cultivation and crops. It is not a block, it's a reduction of surfaces with a left aside process. I'm convinced that almost 80%, maybe 70% of farmers already do that, because this is an agricultural process which is useful for the land itself, for the ground, but also for the wholesalers and so on, so that the ground it cultivated for wholesalers should keep this process. Yes, I think that this set-aside process already exists. And I do not think that we will see a kind of block or reduction in these crops. Thank you very much.
The question is the same for you? The question is the same, yes. And the answers are the same too, for sure. I want to develop another topic, but the main topic is that agriculture is not static. Every year the climate, the precipitation, the heat waves and the cold change. And I am giving this example. Last year, 2022 was a dry year with very little rain, and they did not allow us to fill the basins where we have some, and they also created huge problems where we don't have any. But water is not wasted. Water has a cycle and goes on. So if we want to start from the Alp pastures, we spoke of the springs before. Unfortunately, many springs or water sources that were used by farmers on the mountains. You know, mountain pastures and the cabins, the lodges for the animals and for the herders were always built in places that were repaired by avalanches, but always close to a water spring or close to a derivation of them. Many streams run dry, and this created huge problems in the use of the mountain pastures, and water goes down. In the plain, we can do anything. There are basins, there are some things, because water must be kept nowadays. And today it rains. And many people have said, oh, how lucky. But many farmers are not happy with it. They would have preferred rain in 15 days because they would have ended collecting rice, soy, wheat they would have sown the autumn crops, and at the end of that, just lucky it rains. This rain is not so beneficial to the agricultural world, except for those who have finished their harvest, but there are only a few of them. This autumn was profitable for agriculture. We had a lot of sun. The sun was nearly unprecedented. I'm not saying this is good, but I am just saying that such a warm autumn had never been here before. For 25 days we had no rain, and this autumn allowed them to continue the harvest. Less gas oil was used in dryers, so they polluted less, they spent less money, and that is good. And now I'm going to give you another example, and then I will tell you what we do. In July or August, there was a sudden drop in temperatures. We all speak of the glaciers that unfortunately are losing mass and volume. And in July, this drop in temperatures reduced. We don't have glaciers in Valsesia that is close to this valley. The melt water was reduced, so we had less water in the river Sesia, and the irrigation system in the area of Vercelli and Novara had issues because water was not enough. So not always what seems to be simple or profitable or good or fit is actually immediately profitable for agriculture. This said, we have very different situations. We have an area that is linked to the basins in the area of Vercelli. There is an area that is irrigated thanks to dams on the streams, and some are not irrigated at all. So this spring and autumn, we were thinking of what to sow, because sowing is investing. It means what can I sow that can make me think that I will have an income and less risks of loss. Every product has its own price on the market, and it changes. So this autumn, in the area of Biella, a wide area was sown with cereals, crops that require little water. How can you then harvest in June? And how about corn? Are we going to sow it or not? How about rice? These crops need water. And this year, 2023, there was a huge cut in production. No, not really. In 2023, we found ourselves with a good production of hay cereals. Partly we lost it, and they suffered due to the great amount of rain that we had, not in May, that is typical, but in June. And that changed a little bit of everything. The harvest of hay last year was very poor, and this year was very abundant, but it was done late. Basically, this rain filled the basins, the watersheds, so it improved the situation. And this year, when you asked me, what do you plan to do? This year we had a very good harvest of corn, which requires a lot of water, also in dry soils, where it is not irrigated. If I had been here in November, I would tell the farmers never to sow corn. And this is what happened. So this year everything changed. Prices dropped. Rice this year, I don't know the surface, but the production is very good. Water was there. Let me just tell you that with this, We do not have to linger and think that anyway everything will be good. There are some activities such as flowers that are all irrigated by drop. And recently, the region has been spending money. There's a tender to recycle rainwater or refined waters. So most fruit gardens are irrigated that way. On crops, we have to check each crop. Like with corn, we can anticipate the sowing. So we can try and impact less on the dryness crisis that generally happens in August. So there are some tricks. Change crop. On multi-annual crops, it is not so easy. What can we change? On annual crops, if we had followed the logics of changing because it didn't rain, we would have made huge mistakes. So let me conclude by saying that we also have a PAC that imposes some rules on us. We have a European policy that lends us a hand, but in exchange we have to do what they tell us. And then there is the price factor. I saw what I think that can be profitable or can give a good yield or can make me lose less money. So I conclude by saying that water goes down. But this is a sentence that struck me. Do you remember when the Po was very low and Veneto was complaining because the salt was coming up? The water that we have not used in the watersheds and that from our streams will go into the Sesia River is not lost. This is water that will go into the sea. One last example, in many agrarian territories, the old wells are dry, always, except when lawn irrigation is done. That means that system is very expensive for irrigation, but that water is not lost. It goes to superficial groundwater, and we will recover it one day. Thank you.
Tuo collega. Il punto è lo stesso, se vuole le ripeto un attimo la... Ah, prego.
Do you want me to recap the question? Well, actually, we are leaving craftsmanship industry, and the issues really are very interesting, and they have been very well explained. As far as sustainability is concerned, linked to craftsmanship industry, actually we are stressing our attention focus on sustainability. Why are we doing this? Because, to sum up, we are recording an increasing trend of our companies, members of our association, which are working a lot on sustainability. Just to give some figures, the 66% of our companies are working on sustainability. And in the scope of this percentage, just about 300,000 partners working within renewable energy supply chain, and about 500,000 work in building sectors to improve energy efficiency in the buildings. It is not by chance that next week we will launch a sustainability week, distinguished and characterized by many initiatives, workshops, training courses, meetings addressed to the companies as far as sustainability is concerned. These topics will be held across Italy, so that we are working a lot in relation to sustainability. I would like just to recall your attention, on what we are thinking when we talk about sustainability in manufacturing and craftsmanship industry. When we're talking about sustainability linked to craftsmanship, we are talking about economic sustainability, ethic and social sustainability, as well as environmental sustainability. In relation to these three concepts that I've just quoted, in relation to economic sustainability, we are talking about end products that can be clearly identified, that have been produced caring environment and sustainability, expressing their skills as best as they can. When we talk about ethics sustainability, we are thinking and talking about the fact that these companies are well rooted within the territory where they create trade networks, but also human relationships, so that they really represent a flagship towards the wellness and economic richness of our citizens. And last but not least, we're talking about environmental sustainability. For craftsmanship, this means responsibility, seriousness, ethics, complying with rules, and complying with some principles that unfortunately we are ignoring and setting aside to other new ways. It is not by a chance that companies' representatives talked about ethics, responsibility, and of course, these principles distinguish the whole industry and the whole companies working in many sectors, so that maybe I would like to be honest with you and be humble as well. Maybe we should come back to the origins. We are talking about sustainability because really it represents our needs. But if we enter and delve into the details, our grandfathers actually were working for sustainability, maybe ignoring it because at that time was normal to use healthy local products, working, trying to produce excellent goods. It is not by chance that laundry machines and dishwashing machines lasted lots of years. Unfortunately, the trend is to produce with a high quality. It seems that French people issued a regulation linked to obsolescence. Well, why are we not thinking about that? Well, it is difficult because policymakers, despite the orientation, follows other ideologies and ideas that do not meet sustainability needs. In recent years, I don't want to name anybody, but some attempts to give the right orientation have been recorded. Piedmont region actually released many tenders for energy efficiency improvement, tender related to digitalization, so that a strong commitment can be is evident actually in giving the right orientation and the right direction. Perhaps we would need higher attention by small and medium enterprises that, of course, have other necessities and needs. Thank you very much. Yes, 5 minutes left. Yes, perfect. Yes, we are just running out of time. Yes, I agree with all what has been said. No, we are very interested in knowing your opinion. Thank you. Well, of course, as I said, I would like to say that the topic we are dealing with is very wide. As usual, I try to identify this issue, saying that, of course, water is fundamental for human beings, of course, so that human beings are human for 12 hours per day, but are businessmen for 12 hours per day. So that these topics are strictly linked to water. Our territory, for example, is characterized by little brewery, and water is excellent, and they really have been rewarded with international prizes. Also, dyeing process that use water to reach and achieve excellent and high quality products. So that water is something to be protected. Companies are doing it, but the key point is different. According to our opinion, the problem is culture. Again, because back in 2015, Europe was fostering us in changing direction and changing pace. And then again, in 2020, after 5 years, some regulation have been changed to speed up the process. Nowadays, being responsible, we are considering and looking at future generations. These future generations actually are approaching those things in a different way from ours. Companies' responsibility is to transmit and convey those values, and transmitting this idea to be concrete by taking the litter and putting in the bin, waste bin. My son is 15, and it is totally different from me as far as habits and daily attitudes are concerned. So that I know that we will talk with young businessmen. Yes, Messner said before that it was a kind of critical towards youngsters being leaving those this sex. Yes, I would like. Yes, I wanted to make a question, but then talking about car, of course, shocked me. Yes, of course, I do not share this point of view. Just in 5 minutes, of course, it is not enough to talk about it. I do not agree because I really believe in young people. As far as Bella is concerned, this is not true because young people actually here are very active, very prompt, and also young businessmen and women, so 23%, so that they think that in next 5 years companies are not competitive if they do not adopt in the environment where they work some ethic principles towards youngsters. Back in 2019 we were talking about this. We have to speed up the process, otherwise damage will be evident, and it will be then difficult to sort out these problems. Back in the 60s, we can say that the problem started and evolved. So we cannot say that, okay, we will sort out everything in 5 years. We should invert the process. The society is is different. We can help young people and create those conditions so that they can make the difference. This is the key point, the turning point. As I said before, more than 80%. This, of course, is shocking. Nowadays, our companies are seen and considered also from a financial point of view for balance sheets. So we just consider figures. But talking about credit bodies, now the perspective is different because the substance of a company is based on totally different policies. Yes, for example, in the agricultural industry, the strategies are different, reflecting this way of thinking, differentiated themselves from the extreme natural events. I think that this is a turning point to be competitive, also at an international level, but also nationally, of course. And companies working within the supply chain knows perfectly. But this is the only possibility to be successful within this process, not to stay here waiting for the next forum saying, okay, this worked and this didn't work. It is not by chance that the last round table is made of young people. I would give the floor, maybe it doesn't work. Can you hear me? Yes, it works. I will try to be brief.
Sì.
As we are late, but 5 minutes only. So how about the water district of Ingagna? Let me just take a step back. We can't refer to the only dam that we have here in Biella, only the Ingagna that was built 40 years ago. So it is old, but it started with some difficulties at the time. Those who were in Biella at that time know that it took us a while to start it because our areas had a lot of rain, really a lot of rain. It was the wettest city in Italy, but see how the climate has changed. That dam that was nearly useless at the time is now very valuable, and we must keep it and maintain it and protect it. As the associations always said, it is the only district that ensures water for the soil, and it ensures good quality and quantity harvests. Last year, as my colleagues already said, the drought made the water level to be so low that we could not take water to irrigate the soil, because this dam is not for us only, it is for several towns for drinking water. Many wells can't have water anymore, so they take it from the dam. This is why it is precious, and we must keep it. We do anything we can to make good use of this resource. Those who travel in the low province of Biella and see those pumps where water comes out, and you can also see some rainbows. They are nice to be seen. Yes, and we still see dropping wings. So they irrigate at 10 a.m. or 11 p.m. when there's a lot of sun. Is that foolish? No, it isn't. That dam was designed to serve 300 hectares, a football camp, a football pitch. But now this dam is serving 1,600 hectares, sixfold. So there's a problem of shifts. In order to ensure water for all the soils, we must start 4 a.m. until midnight, every day, including Sundays. So we have 2-hour shifts, depending on the needs of the soil. We also have tools to measure humidity in the soil, a hygrometer, and we have shifts. So there's no waste. If you think that all these fields were irrigated with sliding canals, with a high dispersion of water, we had a quality jump that is incredible. This is one of the best systems in Europe. I have only been in this committee for a few years, but I could see with my own eyes the situation, and of course we must do maintenance for it. We have an irrigation network underground, and it can develop some issues with the years. But if the district is effective and keeps it in good condition, it can ensure water to all the fields. And those who farm the field can have a good quality product in a good amount. We have good quality products because we have water, otherwise we can't. And cows won't make a good milk if they have no good grass. And the same goes for corn. The secretary of the association said that before. Last year we didn't know what to sow because the district thought there was no water in the dam. And then suddenly on the 20th of April, when they had already sown, and you know the weather is always changing, so in 2 months' time it rained so much that we could fill the dam, and we had good harvests. But it was just lucky. So we must try and keep this water as much as possible and make it last as long as possible without wasting it. And what's the goal of it? Our goal is that this dam is in good condition. So this has been overused, and it can't serve this very wide territory. From 300 to 1,600. We have no glaciers, so we have no alternatives. We have no water from snow. We can only keep water when it rains. There's no other way. So my call is this. We have to create some basins, some watershed to keep water when it rains a lot. We also have times when there's too much rain, and then when we need it, it must be released in all utilities, not only for agriculture, many other uses. With water you can do many things. Water is life. I have nothing else to say. If you have no questions, well, I would like to, but I can't due to time reason. I am really very passionate about that, so I would have many questions, but I can only thank you for being here, for your contribution. So please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for our guests. Thank you.
Bene, allora ci avviamo pian piano verso la chiusura.
So we are now moving to the closing of the day, but before our last two speakers, we have one more table for young entrepreneurs. And so I would like to call Mr. Stefano Sanna from the Young Entrepreneur Group of the Union of Biella, Luca Rosa from Confartigianato Biella. Hello. And Eric Martinez from the Young Entrepreneurs CNA Biella. Hello. So, for you, we have the same 5 minutes rule and one common question. You also heard the previous debate. So, young entrepreneurs are those on which we are relying, thinking of a financial, social, and environmental and cultural transition. We also need businesses to work on that. So all the world is in transition. All the world is changing. In your opinion, and from your own perspective, are these changes following the right time and steps, or is there anything that should be done differently to better comply with the modern needs? Let us start from here. Can you hear me? Well, if we want to face this topic, if we want to tackle this topic and this question, we ought to acknowledge that in the last 3 years, with the pandemics, the wars, some things happen that generally happen in a longer period of time, at least 10 years. In the second place, it is nice that you also call companies to reply on topics such as sustainability, because a business has a time horizon that is longer than a mandate, a government mandate. As I think we all of us who have a financial business are planning ahead for 30, 40 years. So we reason on that time frame. And I think that is the appropriate one to also consider the challenges that we are now facing, that we call transitions. Actually, the value that young people can provide to transitions is being able to understand all the dimensions they have. We often speak of digital transition or energy transition, environmental transition, but we speak of it in a way that is incomplete. Let me give you an example, the digital transformation. Many people think, and they will soon realize the limits of this view, that digital transformation means buying software. Actually, the digital transformation is an organizational challenge. So we have to speak of organizational model before thinking of what software we need for the transformation that we want in our company. And also the impact of this transformation has been assessed. They say that sending an email costs 5 grams of CO2 in the atmosphere. So yes, of course, technology helps, but it also pollutes. There is an impact of technology. And I'm also thinking of the spreading of remote work. Now everybody speaks of remote work and short week, but they never compare it with productivity parameters. That is the only parameter that can affect wages, apart from taxes, but that is a different sort of things. Let us then move to the energy transition. We have seen several areas in the world, the US, China, and Europe, that adopted different approaches. In the US, they have investments plan with a very high deficit. In China, we have to say it, the administration is not transparent. It is not a market economy, although it is playing by our rules with pros and cons that should be assessed. And Europe has until now adopted a direction approach, if I may use this term, because it is imposing some limits, some goals, without considering the peculiarities, especially concerning manufacturing, concerning financial and social sustainability. What is not clear is who is giving the money to perform these changes. We can apply carbon taxes, we can do what we want, but this way we are only throwing some products out of the market. Products from places where the work is more expensive. And we also participate in tables in Brussels on energy, on several topics, often divided by category mixes. And they have this approach. They state a limit, and then we don't know if it is reasonable when it is calculated in the different sectors. So young people, I am not saying that you should reject this. Of course, energy and environmental transitions are necessary, but how do we make them? If we realize in 10 years that we have caused industrial desertification, that means that this is also an effect of globalization, because many people, businessmen and women, are left behind, and then they will be angry, and this is something that we can't afford. In your opinion, something that was not done and that should be implemented in this transformation from the point of view of a young entrepreneur? Something concerning the methodology. We had COVID, and then we had the energy crisis with the outburst of war in Ukraine. Confindustria was always in favor of vaccines, of supporting Ukraine, but all the things we said worked according to ATECO codes, category code, and not by supply chains. And when we dealt with the energy crisis, we had models according to which they energy costs are going up, the production will be reduced, and then everything will be balanced in a few years. But this doesn't work that way, because if some little bits don't work in a chain, all the chain is not working anymore, and it will be out of the market, especially today, after making all the chains longer towards east. Now we are realizing that it was a little bit too far, so we have to make them shorter and see what is strategic. With delocalization, you mean? Yes, but delocalization can work. If I have to produce something that is like, maybe there is something that can only be produced in some countries, namely those products that are consumed there. But on some chains, depending on countries that can become enemies, even up to a war conflict, well, that must be assessed with more care. And secondly, production and manufacturing is a part of our culture, so it contributes to all that identifies us. So taking it abroad and not taking care of it, well, I have the feeling that for many years we imagined a future Europe made only of services and no industry, and I don't think that can work. I don't think we can have services without manufacturing. And Europe is a transformative continent, and these processes are a part of our culture, including manufacturing. We are now trying to invert that trend, but it will require an effort, and it will require some time. So these are the topics on which we can do something more. What is underrated or under-evaluated is the demographic emergency, the mismatch of skills between training and work. And one thing on which Confindustria must commit on the forefront is the risk culture and the entrepreneurship. For many years, our young people were exposed to pessimistic storytelling, so everything had to be bad. But actually, the chance to be a businessman or woman as a value, also considering that you can take some risks. Life cannot exist without risks. This is no way out. Risks, the passion for innovation, the passion for scientific and social progress, the attitude towards excellence means the progress of society, and this is the company culture. Thank you very much. Now let me leave the floor to your colleague.
Allora, la questione è la stessa, quindi i tempi, i modi della transizione sono secondo...
So that times and ways for transition are the right ones, or something different would be better? Yes. I would like to recall the role of entrepreneurs and the young ones, who represent the future. Of course, according to my opinion, the approach should be particularly concrete. Unfortunately, the approach that has been taken is totally different. For sure, many companies, but also societies, decided to deal with something different. Our company, for example, is working for the ratio of water used to produce beverages. 9-10 liters used in the last step of the project. Our project is to reduce it on the ratio 3:1. For example, washing process and so on. This is also connected to the fact that efficiency does not only link to environment, but also to saving and reusing water for washing and so on. This is very important for sure. Also digitalization, automatization, and 4.0 regulation helped companies to renovate themselves, making them more sustainable and so on. Also, social and corporate responsibility, of course, is useful to make other people understanding the importance of those dimensions, but also raising awareness among entrepreneurs and companies for their specific roles within the community and the society. Probably little has been done in cutting consumption, energy consumption, and so on, even though I would say that this sector is the one which is characterized and distinguished by ideologies. For example, there are some things that cannot be reduced, otherwise you will lose competencies or skills. The key point is focusing on treating of emissions or wasted and so on. Maybe it's old-fashioned, but yes, I was thinking about energy. Today, also the agrivoltaic energy has been evoked with the skepticism which distinguish it. To reach a photovoltaic plant, of course, you need some land, some territories, and also shedding is not that wrong. So that I would like to point out and to share that the trend is opposite. We are not talking about saving energy, saving water, but we are talking about how to install and to create new system and strategies to produce more water. Well, I am totally agreeing with you, but also because we are aware, or we are starting to be aware, that this is the only solution we have, because people in Italy, in Europe, of course, is characterized by a depopulation, and in the next coming years, resources really will represent something essential. So that it's not a matter of reducing, because okay, we reduce the consumption of soft drinks and so on, and there is just one atmosphere. So if in 2050 there will be 10 billion people, of course we will be affected by the action of other countries. But the point is a different approach to environment, a different approach to treatment, to sort out the issue not just by reducing, but just by reinventing structure and system, always assessing the result and the consequences of a society, of a community, and for the reasons, the clear reasons linked to historical context in which we are living in, we are moving and changing our approach. Europe is becoming an object rather than a subject, because we are not that competitive, but also we are always limited ourselves. Rest of the world actually disagree with us. The population is growing elsewhere and not here. So we should change our approach also towards environment. Thank you very much. Well, a lot has been said about transition, ecological transition. According to my opinion, we should work and we should step on with these dimensions. But I would like to focus on welfare, corporate welfare, maternity leave for women, young people within the companies. We should work on these. After COVID pandemic, a new way of living entrepreneurship has developed agile work, yes, smart working with the advantages and disadvantages, but again, an energy cost that has had it. But yes, it produced more value because the worker is happier, is more satisfied with his or her life, living with his or her family, and so he or she produces more. I asked myself, okay, what about sustainability? What sustainability is actually, and one of the definition that I really appreciated, actually, it is not taken from vocabulary, but it defines an economic well-being that could be constant and progressive, allowing future generation to offer better quality standards. And this is the point, because we are focusing on future generation. We as young entrepreneurs, we should work on this. The concept, sorry for interrupting you, the concept is old, actually, the sustainable development, and the report has been betrayed by reality. Yes, but we should recover it. With the CNA Biella Young Entrepreneurs Group, we tried to build a project related to Biella as Creative City, an artistic project implicating the communities, a multi-annual project. In 2022, we have shown 4 artworks at Fondazione Pistoletto that had been envisaged and designed by artists. Then we have implicated the schools and the high schools ideating these artworks. And these installations were dealing with the issue of environment. One of the artwork, the most shocking one for me, is this ice block with a code in, left there and to melt. This is really shocking to me. We are trying to improve the situation, but this kind of creative experiment is something that works very well, implicating all the stakeholders, artists, communities, institutions, schools, territories at Città dell'Arte. But the project doesn't end, because it will end in 2024, carrying out 4 art pieces developed through the usage of AI technology. The schools will receive these artworks, creating some supports to conceived for lasting over time. This is kind of attempt to educate, to convey a message to young generation, working together. Also, as trade association, we should work together. And okay, this could represent a driver, a push factor, a hint to talk of issues, of problems. Yes, I were here. I attended master intervention, the water supply chain, by being a businessman who do not work with water but with computer. Of course, I was really shocked and curious about it. Thank you very much. Great. Okay, we are running a little bit out of time. I would like to thank you, Sanna Rosa Martinez. Thank you very much for your contribution and your participation. Okay, let's start the last panel of the day. I would like to invite Mr. Marco Marcolongo, the president of Rotary Club in Biella, and Emanuela Baietto, secretary of Rotary Club in Biella. Good evening.
Sì, allora, sì, va bene, entrambi, no, lei ha le diapositive, giusto? Con lei facciamo... Perfetto, perfetto. Allora sì, se non so quanto lungo sia, insomma, se mi riesce a stare una decina di minuti, ce la può fare?
Una decina
Sì.
di minuti, le diapositive sono state impostate per una conferenza di 20-30 minuti.
No, non ce l'abbiamo 20-30 minuti, allora, purtroppo non ce le abbiamo.
Cercheremo di tagliare.
Facciamo 15, negoziamo su 15. Le farò poi magari io un segno quando ci avviciniamo. Prego, prego.
Buonasera.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. I welcome you on behalf of the Rotary Club in Biella, of the committee of all, and all the members. The question was a hard one to answer. It wasn't easy to answer, as members of Rotary Club are always ready to take chances, to accept difficult challenges, sometimes even impossible ones. Just think of the eradication of poliomyelitis, which was made possible thanks to the intervention of Rotary International. But an issue of global reach, such as climate changes, can be very difficult to overcome also for the most active members. What do we mean by climate changes? Those long-term variations in temperature and in weather models that can happen in a natural way along the centuries or millenniums. Instead, we are seeing, and we have seen this torrid summer and very warm autumn, that the last few years have been the hottest in Europe. Average temperature went up by 2.2 degrees, compared to the pre-industrial period. And if a further increase in temperature is more than 1.1 degrees in the next 10 years, we would have catastrophic consequences with the melting of the ice cap, a higher sea level, a change of ocean streams, and extreme weather phenomena. These are the consequences of higher level of the sea, extreme climate situations. So this is a proof of what climate changes can cause. Can you see polar bears? They are extinguishing because they do not have the ice cap anymore, and they don't have food anymore. So what should we do? The leaders of the Earth regularly meet at climate conferences, and at the end of them they announce strategies that are not applied because often they negatively impact the economies of industrialized countries. So they leave the floor to scientists. We have a writer, an entrepreneur, an environmentalist who is called Paul Hawken, who used a mathematical model to assess the climate and economical impact of 101 interventions to reduce GHG in order to invert the climate changes and global warming. These strategies are announced in order of importance. We can see that in the third place we have the food waste, a reduction of food waste. 1/3 of the food that is meant for human consumption, fruit, vegetables, meat, dairy products, remain in the fields grow old in warehouses or in fridges and then end up in the dustbin. Or in fields, they generate methane because it is a greenhouse gas. And what can we do? Some Rotary members in California made up a training center where the surplus by a food company that produces approximately 20 tons of waste food per day are used for training for safety in food preparations. The aim is to reduce by 75% food waste. As an intervention strategy, in the 5th place in this range, we have tropical forest. They used to cover 12% of the Earth's surface, and now they only cover 5%. As you know, deforestation contributes to 19% of greenhouse gases emissions on Earth. Trees, as we know, fix carbon dioxide by the photosynthesis. Forests restore the wilderness and its habitat, and they limit the damages of floods. So, an important intervention by Rotary in Turin and Annecy sponsored a project that led to reforestation of 50 hectares in the tropical forest of Madagascar. The 6th place of this range listing the strategies to counter global warming, we have female education. A woman with no school education has on average 4 or 5 children more compared to a woman who went to secondary school. So investing in women education can have a strong impact on demographic growth. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, 90% of Rome women is illiterate, and less than 15% of their children go to school. This condition makes them especially vulnerable for criminal activities as human trafficking. Mostar Rotary Club in Bosnia-Herzegovina made a project funded by Rotary Foundation to follow 80 families with high-risk children, obtaining a significant increase in their enrollment in school. Solar panels. Less than 2% of electricity in the world is generated by photovoltaic panels, although in the last few years it is cheaper, and so they are widespreading. Rotary Club in Leogane, Haiti, and Parker in Colorado installed in a school in Haiti a hybrid system with solar and electric grid, with a saving of more than $4,000 per year on the purchase of carbon and a consequent reduction of sound and air pollution. This system is used for lighting and to feed fans, computers, and teaching facilities, and also for water. Regenerative agriculture. The interventions are meant for protecting the soil with 3 interventions: the abolition of mechanical means, the set-aside, and the ban to fertilizers and pesticides. These provisions will enrich the soil with carbon, and so they will make the crops healthier. Thanks to regenerative agriculture, the organic matter in the soil would be increased by 4 to 7% in 10 years, with the absorption of additional 50 to 120 tons of carbon dioxide for each hectare. In a Taiwan village, 40 farmers learned these regenerative techniques thanks to the Rotary Club Taipei project and Patuan in Thailand. Family planning. In the poorest countries, more than 200 million women have no access to contraception, with the consequent 74 million unwanted maternities. So it seems that guaranteeing women the sanitary assistance they want would have a good result for the planet, because we would have less a reduction of emissions due to overpopulation, although it is known that the poorest country contribute less to the air pollution. But with the help of a global aid, the Rotary clubs in Finot and Darmstadt in Germany developed a project for obstetricians and midwives to help women in their family planning. And what is Rotary doing in Biella? Rotary Biella is embracing the 7th area of Rotary International, that is environmental sustainability. This year we will make, in 2023-2024, a small therapeutical garden for the hospital of Biella. And we will position it in the area that is now called the roof garden on the first floor. This is the area as it looks like now, so it's very wide with gravel only. And this is the project that the architect, Mr. Baietto, has suggested. And Ms. Baietto has suggested. So we see a wooden catwalk with some trees, some shrubs, some flowers and benches. In literature, these therapeutical gardens are very wide. Many hospitals in Italy and Europe have endowed their areas of green areas in the open air, outdoors. And it seems that the presence of these green areas has beneficial effects on the patients that can, of course, leave their rooms. Less stress for the patients, their families, and also staff. This could accelerate the patient's independence, improve the mood and the quality of living. This could also accelerate the healing time with a reduction of the costs for treatment. Social life would be improved, and maybe also the immune system, as they would be outdoors, and with the sun our immune system would improve. And with this, I hope that I have been on time. I wish that the next generations will go back to see a great number of polar bears, maybe in their natural habitat. You were very good. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Now let us close this dense and long day with Mrs. Baietto, Secretary of the Rotary Club in Biella. And I have a question for her. Did you receive it? No, I'm going to ask you now. Don't worry, just do what you have prepared. Very, very good.
Esatto, sì, il collegamento tra Rotary Club e città creative UNESCO. Prego.
Allora, io ho preparato...
Well, yes, I have prepared some slides that sum up the reason why, as a Rotary Club, we have chosen to create this network, supporting creative cities. Among the intentions, it doesn't work. Among the purposes pursued by UNESCO, the creativity is a strategic element to reach a sustainable urban development. Sustainability is everywhere. Synergies made possible by the network of creative cities through the particular identities of each city could be properly enhanced and represent a source for development and conveyed to future generations. There are 13 cities, creative cities in Italy, and there are many Rotary clubs in Italy because each city has its one or even more Rotary clubs. This means that the network of Rotary clubs is particularly rich. And the cities that have been acknowledged as creative cities have been particularly supported by Rotary clubs, not for being an alternative or something additional of creative UNESCO cities, but also to talk to think about the mission of Rotary Club. So the main goal is building peace and brotherhood among people. This matches together with UNESCO Creative Cities objectives. In this concept, of course, the initiatives of Italian Creative UNESCO Network to create a support the creative cities and helping the cities fostering the initiatives, also trying to find common synergies. What we are doing as network creative are the bread stops. Bread and flowers used are old, and this project has the objective to visit every single city in Italy and widespreading the knowledge and the usage of flowers and bread to all meals, building synergies among creative cities, to widespread the traditions. Bread represents creativity in Italy, and this project perfectly matches with the ideas of creative cities. Yes, I was very, very quick in my presentation. Perfect. Thank you for your intervention, so that we are ending up this first day that has been very intense. I hope that you would able to feel the same feeling. Very interesting, full of information, news, and so on. I would like to invite Councillor Greggio, giving some information for tomorrow. I won't be here. I will try to recover the efforts made today. Thank you, Marco. Thank you. Yes, it has been really intense day, but we launch this surprise tomorrow morning. There will be the participation. Yes, from Masner to the oceans, because within this program we will have Mr. Giovanni Soldini with us, the famous sailor. We will have Mr. Piccato Fratin, Ministry, and then we will try to connect with him by remote connection. So Mr. Giovanni Soldini is monitoring some samples to test the state of art of water. We will wait for you tomorrow morning at 9:30 with the ministry, with Mr. Soldini, and then, of course, the all Italian UNESCO Creative Cities. Thank you for those people surviving this intense day. Thank you and see you soon.